From the savory-smelling studios of Univest at Lehigh Valley Public Media in Bethlehem, PA, it is time for another vampire-chasing episode of chemical-free horticultural hijinks You Bet Your Garden. The holiday, formerly known as Columbus Day, has long been considered the lucky day to plant garlic. But is it lucky in every area? I'm Mike McGrath, and on today's show, we'll discuss the hows and whens of garlic planting time in different regions. Plus, how to pick the proper plants for love and or personal protection. And, of course, your fabulous phone call questions, comments, tips, tricks, suggestions, and generously grandiose gratifications. So stay right where you are, cats and kittens, because it's all coming up faster than you turning the calendar back a month right after this.
Support for You Bet Your Garden is provided by the Espoma Company, offering a complete selection of natural organic plant foods and potting soils. More information about Espoma and the Espoma Natural Gardening Community can be found at espoma.com.
Welcome to another thrilling episode of You Bet Your Garden from the Univest studios at Lehigh Valley Public Media in Bethlehem, PA. I am your host, Mike McGrath. We got a lot to do today. Coming up in the question of the week, we're going to talk about the different times for garlic planting in different regions. Other people's lucky day may be your worst day. We're also going to speak to the author and illustrator of a brand new book called The Green Witch's Guide to Magical Plants and Flowers. I have found it to be very enjoyable, and you will too. But, like I said, that's a lot to get done. So we're going to hop right to your fabulous phone calls at 888-492-9444. Rose, welcome to You Bet Your Garden.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. You have no idea. My little heart is just pounding being on the air with you.
That's what all the girls say, I wish.
I bet they do.
And where is your heart pounding? And don't say the left side of your chest. Where are you calling from?
Well, actually, I'm calling from Union Station in Denver, Colorado, but we live in Nashville, Tennessee, and that's where my problem lies.
Or lays, depending. I mean, I could never figure that out.
Or lays.
I know that when I say it, it'll be wrong. You know, that's... So, what's your problem in Nashville? Nobody's buying your songs?
I wish. Thank you for that. No, I have, 7 rose bushes in 3 different places on my property. 2 of them are miniature roses, and they came from Cleveland, Ohio. I've had those for 30 years. I have a climbing rose and 4 knockout roses. And they start out in the spring doing really well. They have lovely buds and green leaves. And as the spring goes on and it gets hotter, they become leafless, although the miniature roses do continue to bloom, as do the knockout roses. But the climbing rose is just a wreck. And it looks like, I'm sure it's true, something is eating it. And I'm embarrassed to tell you that they've been neglected for all the years that I've had them. So I'm calling for advice.
You sent us a lot of pictures. And
oh, yeah.
Yeah, so the jury finds you guilty of neglect.
Thank you.
One of these poor roses seems to be growing out of a rock slide. And...
Yeah, well...
One of them appears to be growing out of a tangle of other plants. And one of them almost looks to be correctly planted. So you're batting, what is that, 200?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Well, I have cleaned up. I mean, there's a lot of weeds. And there's the rose bed with the knockout roses gets a lot of weeds. And I do a big push of removing stuff in the spring. And then it gets too hot and I neglect it. So that could be. And I moved a lot of plants, the climbing roses, against a fence. And it was surrounded by iris and daylilies. And I pulled all those out. And that might be the one that looks like it's growing out of a rock garden. The Yeah, I tried one year to put, because my son did this in two of his homes. He put in rocks instead of mulch,
Oh, God.
and it was lovely.
Yeah,
And I
but
tried
full of
to do that.
weeds.
Well, yes. Hello. Yeah. Well, I'm trying to take those rocks out. So, too, the miniature roses are in a bed that has rocks, and I'm trying slowly to remove those. But it's annoying and time-consuming.
Yeah, I don't.
Labor-intensive.
Yeah, I've never understood the rock mulch concept, but that's a lot of things I don't understand. Anyway, so one thing I want to mention before I forget it is the knockout roses. They are highly subject to the rose mosaic virus. When it looks, when the plant starts producing new growth that doesn't look like rose growth. It looks like raspberry canes or wineberry canes. And if that happens, 99% of, quote, garden experts will tell you the plant has to be destroyed. I just prune it off as soon as I see it, and I have kept a French landscape rose alive for 10 years, which is mild pruning. So some roses only bloom once. Some roses will bloom 3 or 4 times in a season. My climbing rose really only blooms once. I have another. Yeah, but that might be just the variety I grew. But here's the secret to rose growing. You clear the area under the rose. Roses in my garden, in my feelings, are very tough plants if you treat them properly. And that means airspace, airflow. So you don't plant anything too close to them. You get rid of any weeds, rocks, old car parts, whatever you got down there. And if you want to ensure a better looking plant once summer hits, 2 inches of compost over the surface of the soil, going out as far as you can. If you don't make compost, there's no shame. You can buy very high quality bagged compost these days at independent garden centers. And whether you use compost on all your plants or just roses, it is the roses that get the triage first. So you keep that open. As soon as you see a leaf you don't like, a discolored leaf, pull it off. 2 reasons. First, you might be stopping the spread of disease or eliminating a pest. But more importantly, it's going to look like you're better at this game than you think, because the neighbors aren't going to notice that your roses have like 30% fewer leaves. They're just going to notice there's no yellow leaves out there.
Right.
When you water, when you go into your dry period in Nashville, you water deeply once a week unless, it gets ridiculous.
Right.
And then you can water twice a week. But I'm talking about letting a hose drip at the base of each plant for 3 to 4 hours. It takes 20 minutes for a plant to kind of recognize that it's being watered. So watering for shorter periods of time is like a cheap tease. But, by the time they realize something's happening, it stopped. And if you have good airflow, you pull off discolored leaves, you got to mulch your compost, and you water correctly, I confidently predict that your roses will perform much better.
Oh, I'm excited. I'm embarrassed to tell you that I've never thought of watering them. I don't know why. It just seems, I just shouldn't even mention it on the air or in aloud, but I will.
There are certain plants like tomatoes and ranges that show you when they're dry. They start to get droopy on hot days.
Oh, yes.
But roses don't react that way. They don't like wet feet. They like to dry out between waterings, which is why we do the once a week ideally. You know, they get dry,
Right.
they grow deeper roots, they get watered again, everybody's happy. But yeah, no, in this you got to pay attention and get a rain gauge. I mean, they're dirt cheap. And if you get an inch of water in a normal weather week, you don't have to do anything.
Oh, okay.
All right?
Oh, yeah, that's great. I will send you pictures a year from now and show you the progress I've made.
I can't wait.
I really appreciate your help.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
You
Bye.
too. Well, it's time for me to take a little break and remind everybody of my concerns about feeding birds with seed in the spring and summer. The high concentrations of birds and their poop in those feeders has been linked to a wicked eye disease and sometimes avian death. Now, winter is another story, but instead of seed, put out suet feeders. You'll see just as many birds without the risk of disease or attracting and feeding rats, mice, voles, shrews, raccoons, and deer with spilled bird seed. But don't go seeking that suet just yet, because we'll be right back with an interview about choosing the proper plants for love and protection and more of your fabulous phone calls. I'm Mike McGrath, and you're listening to You Bet Your Garden from the Univest studios at Lehigh Valley Public Media in Bethlehem, PA.
Support for You Bet Your Garden is provided by the Espoma Company, offering a complete selection of natural organic plant foods and potting soils. More information about Espoma and the Espoma Natural Gardening Community can be found at espoma.com.
Welcome back to You Bet Your Garden from the Univest studios at Lehigh Valley Public Media in Bethlehem, PA. I am your host, Mike McGrath. Coming up later in the show, we're going to discuss the proper time to plant garlic, which you may think you know, but you probably don't. But right now, we're going to welcome our very special guest, Chris Young, one of the co-authors of The Green Witch's Guide to Magical Plants and Flowers. And it is co-authored, and we're going to start with the plant guy, Chris Young, who has a long history of growing plants. Now, Chris, when, I should mention that it's published by Skyhorse Publishing. Chris, when did you start? Did you start gardening first and then get into the lore?
The Green Witch stuff? Yeah. I started really when I was a little bitty kid. My grandpa in Indiana would take me out in their backyard, and they had kind of a big backyard. And he taught me all about plants and nature and gardening, and because I didn't know where flowers came from when I was really little, and I'm talking like 6 years old or so, I would go out into the woods and get the plants that I liked and then plant them in my parents' yard and then tend them. So, which I don't recommend people doing now because that's stealing. But I didn't know. So it's been lifelong.
That's great. Now, when did you start to think about the historic is the wrong word, traditional uses for these plants in things like love potions and protective spells?
Well, when I was in my 20s, I had a job in New York that was very stressful, and at the place where I worked, they had a kitchen, and in the kitchen was this woman named Irma, and it turned out she was a green witch, and I would come into her, I guess her office, the kitchen was her office, and I would, be all upset about my boss, and she would say, "Oh, well, here, let's burn some onion skins. It's kind of like saging," or or she would give me little things to do, and it was just so grounding. It just really calmed me down. And I think that's the main thing about the practice in general, is that it's kind of all about grounding and centering yourself when you do all the stuff. And
Yeah,
so that's what I picked up in my 20s. And then when it came time, when Susan and I were trying to figure out what to do book-wise, I said, well, we wanted to do a book about flowers and plants. And I said, well, I think it's got to be about, magical plants and flowers. And then we decided it should all be about love. And then that's kind of how it happened.
yeah, because the book reads very well,
Oh,
and is very positive. Um, and I noticed that almost every spell or usage was about love and
mm-hmm.
or protection against evil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. From Bad Mojo.
I I
And
I can't
go
believe
ahead.
I can't believe you use that word, because
Really?
a dear friend of mine from California has a little company called the Lucky Mojo Curio Company. Her name's
Oh, wow.
Kat Ironwood, and what she has done is reintroduced the old hoodoo um,
Oh,
medicines that African
yeah, hoodoo,
Americans
yeah.
used extensively, and were sold in black establishments and in the back pages
Mm-hmm.
of magazines designed for African Americans.
That's so cool.
And I noticed some crossover in what you're doing and what she did. Now, the her little curio company sells talismans and
Mm-hmm.
certain herbs for chewing, and they have hilarious names. I can't decide if my favorite is Stop Gossip Oil, or what's the other one? A court case bath. Before you
That's
have to go
great.
to court, you put these crystals in bath water, and
That's so great. I love it.
well, and
Yeah, I wish
then
I knew more about hoodoo, actually.
she also wrote a very extensive book on the history and the spells that people could create. And I want
Mm-hmm.
to direct your attention to apples. Um,
Ah.
I You really front loaded the book, to two of the best things in it, in my mind, are apples and basil.
Yeah, thank you. Those are two of my favorites. Basil is my big favorite, partially just because it's so delicious.
And
But it's such a great plant.
I'm going to
It's
yell at
such a
you about
protective
basil,
plant.
though. Be warned.
Uh-oh,
When we get to
tell me.
basil, you're going to be in trouble. But in the old hoodoo, a lot of times you would write the name of a person on a slip of paper, and then do
Uh-huh.
something involving plants or oils, or burying it with different sacred
Because it was.
plants or things like that. And
Mhm.
so I'm going through your book, and I'm looking at the apple binding spell.
Oh yeah, that's where you. I can explain it if you'd like.
Now, please.
It's where you carve an apple, kind of like you would do a pumpkin, and it's not easy. You have to be very careful because
Yeah.
they're so little. They're so little, and you have to have a very delicate knife. But you carve it out, you hole out the center, and then you carve a heart in the side of the apple, like kind of like a pumpkin face. and then you put in your picture, and then you put in, you could, there's lots of ways you can do this, but you put in, if there's someone specific that you've got a crush on, you put their picture in there. And another thing you could do is add things that you would like to have in that person, like qualities, and then you bury that. Ideally at the base of an apple tree, but it doesn't have to be, as long as it's buried.
And as I'm looking at it now, you can also write their name on a slip of paper and put
or
it
you
in.
Can do,
or both.
Or you could. There's the fun thing about these spells. We've kept them really simple so that you can really add to them or change them. Like you could also just put your picture in, and then put the qualities on another slip of paper. Qualities of, and it could be anybody. It could be a friend that you're looking for. You want loyalty, put that down. Or if it's an animal that you're hoping to have and adopt, put the qualities that you would like in your animal. So it could be really for any kind of relationship.
And again, I mean, you give apples a lot of ink here, so to speak. And
yeah, that was our starter. We really went crazy on apples.
Oh yeah, and the history going back to the goddess Aphrodite. Everything here is really interesting. And one thing I had never thought of, although I must have done it hundreds of times, is if you cut an apple the correct way, the seeds form a pentagram.
Yeah, if you cut it right in half, and sailors used to, back in the old times, used to use that as a guide also, as a compass.
It's it's amazing. Okay, now I got a beef with you about basil.
Uh-oh.
yeah, you're in trouble now, man.
Oh no!
According to you, if you grow basil at or near the entrance to your house, your true love will come to you, right?
It's also saying that you're available.
Yeah. Well, this summer, through coincidence, because I hadn't seen the book yet, I had two great containers of basil. One was a dwarf Greek basil, very pretty.
Nice.
And the other was, the typical sweet Italian basil. And they were both rectangular containers, and I have a lot of containers on my patio. The basil was closest to the road. Hello, I'm here. And I didn't get any hits, man.
But, okay, in my defense, I will say, when you put them there by your door, was your intention to draw love to you? Because intention is everything.
Well, actually, actually, you do point that out several times in the book. It doesn't just start with Apple. You do a lot of things on the equipment you might want to have. And you talk about, being cognitive of what you're doing.
Yeah, we call that, our little term for that is magical mindfulness.
Yeah.
So, when you're using a spatula or whatever, think of that as a wand. Think of how you're laying your equipment out when you're making a recipe or making a craft of some kind. Make it like a ritual. That's our big thing, and because that's so good for you yourself while you're doing it.
So now I got to do this again next year, but I got to be thinking about it. I got to have good vibes,
Good intentions.
Hey, one thing I noticed I didn't see, the basil we're talking about here is annual, and there's like 400 different varieties.
Oh, yeah, there's all
basil.
kinds, yeah.
But do you mention holy basil at any point?
Well, when it comes to plants and spells, if you're doing a spell that calls for basil, you can use any sort of basil. It doesn't matter the kind of basil, just that it is basil.
Because one of the entries revealed to me that you're familiar with Ayurvedic medicine. And,
Mhm.
the holy basil plant is revered in that
Yes.
discipline. And that's a perennial if you protect it
Yeah,
from
yeah.
frost.
Yeah. And there's an African basil that's a perennial too that's just beautiful.
I'm just
It's kind
wondering
of a reddish.
if I should double down next year,
Yeah, maybe you try a lot of different basils.
One thing I also want to mention is I was delighted. It's not all about plants. You also bring up other magical traditions. And one of the
Mhm.
things, I forget what entry it was under, but maybe it was in the beginning. You go off on a tangent about having a true broom, which is
Oh yeah.
which is not the broom you use to sweep your floors, but a handmade broom. And
Yeah,
that,
that you can make yourself with just a stick and some herbs, and you use that symbolically to cleanse your area, your space before you do a craft or a spell or a ritual or a recipe.
and am I correct? You
Uh,
could also hang it on your front door, your bedroom door for
for
protection.
protection. Yeah,
Yeah, one of the
yeah.
things I
I
like
actually,
most about the book is all the spells are about positive things.
yeah, we wanted it to be all positive, all good energy, all upbeat. And we wanted it to be really simple. We didn't want it to be anything that would be overwhelming or, would make people feel like, oh my gosh, I can't do this.
Well, and
We
I
try to keep
also
it.
have to add that it's a cool read.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm very flattered by that.
There
Thank you.
are, there are books that get tedious after a while, but a book that's arranged like yours is the perfect thing to read in long stretches. Put it
Oh,
down,
thank you
pick
so
it
much.
up. You even got the ribbon sewn into the
We even
book.
got the ribbon. You can't know how excited we were by the ribbon.
I think it's a perfect addition for this book.
hmm
Now, I also want to mention, getting back to the broom. When I was a beat reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer, one of
hmm
my beats was Chinatown, and I
Mm.
would always do a big story for the Lunar New Year,
Oh yeah.
and the people celebrating quote Chinese New Year, Lunar New Year, had a
hmm
tradition of sweeping out the house from top to bottom, starting at the top,
hmm
and then you couldn't pick up the dirt inside. You had to sweep it outside.
Outside.
And
Yeah.
that got rid of any evil spirits that were
Yeah.
in the
That's a good
house.
one.
And
That's a good one.
and you also at a certain time of day had a complete new set of clothes ready. Socks, underwear, everything. And
So
you
everything's fresh.
everything is fresh for the new year.
Well,
And
another thing. Oh, go ahead.
no,
Sorry.
you go ahead.
No, I was going to say another thing I like to do. This isn't part of the Chinese New Year, but on the New Year, or it can be a new month or a new week, depending on what's going on for you. But is blowing cinnamon in your doorway, just putting some on your hand and blowing it into your doorway, is good luck.
Yeah, you do a lot on cinnamon in this book.
We like cinnamon. Cinnamon's one of our. I think it's in. We're working on a Oracle deck now, and I think cinnamon might be in there.
So
We like that one.
before we leave the broom thing, I was delighted to read that. I used to be a volunteer at the Philadelphia Folk Festival,
Oh,
and
cool.
every August the volunteer committee, the security committee, grounds, we'd be there for like 10 days getting everything ready.
Wow.
And we always had a fabulous craft area. The crafters would fight to get a spot. And one of the lucky people who was invited to return year after year sold handmade brooms that they made on the site.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
And somewhere back in the 70s, I bought it. I bought one for myself, and it just luckily, because I had no intentions. Now I realize I gotta have good intentions. You're making me
Yeah,
you're making me work
put it
here.
over. Yeah. Not too hard, I hope.
But I've never used
Yeah,
it.
put that over your doorway.
I've never used it for sweeping,
Mm-mm.
and
That's good.
I've always liked looking at it.
Yeah, they're beautiful. When I have one, I've actually found it on Etsy. I didn't make it myself. I was lazy. But I have my broom is I got it on Etsy, and it's from the Ukraine, and it's beautiful. I mean, it's like this kind of gnarly wood handle, and then like the wheat. It's really nice. Wheat brush. Yeah.
I always have. I mean, I've had mine for decades, and I've always had a feeling. I've always
Mhm.
just enjoyed looking at it.
Mhm. You sense the magic.
Yeah, I guess I must. Well,
Yeah.
listen, we're going to have to kick you off soon so we can
Okay.
talk to your co-author.
Yeah, Susan's the
But
best.
before we do, is what's your favorite plant or spell that we haven't discussed?
Ooh, that we haven't discussed. I really love the magnolia jar. It's a little jar that you put together. I can't remember the ingredients right off the top of my head, but I love that. And I love there's a feverfew sachet that you make with rosemary, roses, pink quartz, and feverfew, and you put it in. Oh, I'm sorry. One more thing, acorns, and you carry that in a little bag with you, with the intention that it will attract love. That's one of my favorites
I
because
mean,
it's so
and that's
simple.
almost pure hoodoo. The crossover in these
Mhm.
disciplines is amazing, and you
Well,
know,
because all these people were the healers of the communities, in the past.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, and when you look at these, I have a collection of the sachets and the bottles and the herbs and
Uh huh.
stuff, and it makes you smile just to look at it.
It's pretty, yeah. I mean, that's part of the whole thing, is that it's just so calming, just to have them and to make them and to be around them. I think that's a really important factor in magic.
And the magnolia jar, do you remember what it was for, so to speak?
It's to attract love. I kind of remember there's some sugar for sweetness in there.
Mm-hmm.
There's the magnolia, a little magnolia branch that attracts love. I'm pretty sure there's some lavender and roses in there because those are two big love attracting
Mm-hmm.
plants. And then you seal it up with a pink ribbon and you put it away in like a dark spot and keep it till it works. And
Well,
then when you get that relationship, then you return everything back to nature. That's the trick.
that's right. I remember reading that now, and I thought that was so, I'm going to say sweet because
Yeah,
it's like composting. You've closed the circle. You haven't wasted
right.
anything.
You didn't waste it. You gave it back to nature. Yeah, I like that.
Well, I could keep you on the air until they take away my pass key to get into the building.
I
Um,
would love that.
but I want to get on to Susan, and
Okay.
it's a wonderful book. It is a happy book,
I can't thank you enough for saying that. Thank you.
and it's called The Green Witch's Guide to Magical Plants and Flowers with Spells for Love and Protection. And you people out there, you're going to love it.
Yay.
So, Chris Young, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been my pleasure. You take care now.
Mine too. Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Well, it's time for me to take a little break and warn everybody out there with a cool season lawn. That means bluegrass and/or fescue. The time is running out for you to overseed bare spots and cure compacted soil, one of the biggest causes of lousy-looking lawns, with a core aeration that pulls plugs out of the dirt and allows air and water to better reach the root system. But don't go pulling any plugs just yet, because we'll be back to explain why the right time to plant garlic depends on where you live. I'm Garlic Mad Mike McGrath, and you're listening to You Bet Your Garden from the Univest Studios at Lehigh Valley Public Media in Bethlehem, PA. Welcome back to another thrilling episode of You Bet Your Garden from the Univest Studios at Lehigh Valley Public Media in Bethlehem, PA. I am your host, Mike McGrath, and now it is my great pleasure to continue discussing my new favorite book, The Green Witch's Guide to Magical Plants and Flowers. We just finished talking to Chris Young, and now we're bringing on his co-author, Susan Ottaviano. Susan, first, welcome to You Bet Your Garden.
Glad to be here. Hello. How are you doing?
I'm just ducky. Thanks for asking. Now, you did all of the illustrations for the book, and you actually wrote the recipes.
Yes, I did.
So
I'm an artist, but I'm also a food stylist. So I do food for magazines and TV, and I develop recipes. So this was a joy to work on as well.
Right, because it's not a book that just names plants and what they're good for. You go into the ancient
The magical
tradition.
properties of these plants.
Yeah,
Yes.
and
we have
mixing them and utilize them, and
yes,
you know,
we have
recipes.
spells and recipes and crafts and all sorts of things that you can do with these flowers and plants.
As I discussed with Chris, one of my favorites was the love apple, for lack of a better word, where you carve it like a pumpkin and put in a photo of the person you want to have fall in love with you, or their name on a slip of paper, and you bury it, because that reminded me of so many other magical traditions that utilize, the same basic concepts. So
Totally.
yeah, there are so many crossovers, and as Chris pointed out, well, in all of these disciplines, these people were the healers and,
Yes.
The spiritual head of their community. So how did you find these recipes? Did you create them? Did you rediscover them?
A little bit of both. We chose the 26 flowers and plants that we wanted to use for the book, and then we some of them are actually poisonous, so you wouldn't want to eat them. But the ones that are edible, we decided that we wanted to move in. Our book sort of developed very organically, so we were just going to do an illustration of each, and then the book sort of grew and grew, and then we started to kind of come up with the idea of doing recipes, and some of them are my own recipes, and some of them are new things. But it was wonderful to work on.
So what are, I like your I love the book. I love your illustrations. The recipes are a ton of fun. And again, I hate to repeat myself, but as I spoke with Chris, it's a really happy book. This is all about positive magic and fun stuff. So,
and also with our, we have this we talk about magical mindfulness, and it's really about mindfulness and taking the time out to really enjoy a cup of tea and creating rituals and things that manifest more love in your life and just calm you and focus you?
Chris stressed that, and I kind of playfully yelled at him that the basil didn't work, that I had 2 giant containers of basil right in front of my house, and nobody came to the door saying they were falling in love with me. And he goes,
I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no, it's supposed to be fun. And he goes, well, were you thinking of that when you put the containers there?
Exactly. Did you set your intention? That manifesting is the most important part, and that's what we're trying to encourage.
Right. So it's like baseball. There's always next year, right? You know?
Yes.
So,
and setting your intentions about love or about a new job or a new project is the way to inspire you to move on.
oh, yeah. You know, some of these things happen, as you say, organically. But I like the idea of giving your mind this concept of having an edge, really wanting this thing, or really wanting to feel more protected. Because again, the spells are love and protection, right?
Yes. I mean, there's a few other things, but the book is based on love. We sort of use that as our focus. But all the plants have other properties as well.
Yeah, gee, that won't sell, will it? Trying to get somebody to fall in love with you. Oof.
But we're also talk about not just romantic love, self-love, friendship, family love, and again, the self-love part is very important, because then you can, if you feel good about yourself, you can take better care of others. That's another thing we're talking about with our recipes, is cooking with love. What does that mean, and why is that something people always said? If you spend the time to grow the vegetables, you take the time with them, you set your intentions, you will, you know what that feels like.
Oh,
That's
God,
why,
yes.
You know, people love Grandma's cooking.
Yeah. My tomato sauce has 3 ingredients: the tomatoes I've grown, the garlic I've grown, and the basil I grow.
Wow.
And I actually do, now that you mention it, I think about that as, you know, getting it all together and ready. And I also say that if
the ritual of putting all these things together, you know, I think that in many cultures, like a Japanese tea ceremony, there's all different cultures where in every culture there's rituals that are done to calm the mind and focus on the person.
So tell me about, you know, one of your favorite recipes and how it came together, whether you crafted it or you combined a couple of traditional spells and recipes, and maybe the one you had the most fun with.
Well, I think that our recipes are very simple, and we wanted to start with this book about really not being intimidating and putting people off just trying things. And we also encourage people to improvise and to substitute items if you don't have it there. If you don't have pine nuts for the pesto, use walnuts, or vice versa. Or, you know, you don't have lemon, try lime. You know, you never know. All the happy accidents all the greatest things were created through happy accidents. But I guess I would say my favorite was the love meal at the end of the book that I created from start to finish with the pomegranate punch, which I'm going to be making this week. Next week we're doing a book signing in Milford, Pennsylvania.
Oh, that's right.
The pomegranate punch.
That's right.
Yeah, we want to talk about that.
Yeah. We're taping this in advance because we're a national show, so we have to do that. And the podcast goes up on Friday afternoon, evening, and the show goes national on Saturday. And Saturday the 30th is when you're going to be signing in Milford, PA, right?
Yes, I'm going to be at Earthly Treasures in Milford, PA on Sawkill Avenue. And a bunch of my friends have places up near Hawley and Milford, and that they set up this book signing for me. That's what I'm doing in your neck of the woods.
And
but we're excited about it, and I'm going to have lots of treats there. I'm going to have the pomegranate punch in our book, and I'm also going to have a lot of seasonal things. We're celebrating the apple right now, and we have a bunch of little snacks and recipes with apples and a few other things. We're going to have some jasmine bath salts there, and I'm going to have a love potion, things for people to try.
With only the best intent.
Yes.
And that's going to be at 3:00 in the afternoon.
Yes, it is. So please stop by and have a glass of pomegranate punch with us.
Right, exactly. I wish I could have given you a week extra notice, so to speak, but at least it's enough time for people who are interested to get there.
Yes.
And thank you for bringing it up, because I totally forgot.
Oh, no problem. But the pomegranate punch has been great. We've had that at all of our book signings. And then I'm also making a special vodka, a cranberry vodka, special for the season. It's little shots of that with it. It's like a cranberry lemon mixture with a little sugar, and it's a great little a conversation starter.
Yeah, especially after the third one. You know what? I'm blanking out, and I realize the next question I wanted to ask you is, I think I understand mindfulness, and when you're doing something like this, it's natural to focus. But what about people like me who are losing it all? What can I blend up to stave off?
Well, I guess I'm trying to teach people to be more creative, because the creativity helps me in so many ways, and to look at things in a different way, to notice the small things, and to enjoy a ritual like making a cup of tea or taking a bath or looking at a leaf. Or I think you're doing it. If you're a gardener, you're doing it. You're weeding, you're doing all these kind of things, and kind of calming your mind.
One of the best people who ever walked the planet was my old friend, Dr. Jim Duke, who studied medicinal properties of plants for the USDA for like 30 years. And I remember him once telling me that sage will not make you sage, but that rosemary will. It's the herb of memory.
Yes, remembrance.
So, I got to grow more rosemary.
Rosemary is great for so many things.
Yeah,
rosemary is great. We have rosemary in our next project, so I'm working on a recipe for that. Our book is vegan, so it gets a little creative with the the baking. But I'm working up potatoes and rosemary go together.
Oh, good Lord!
Business, so
bread and butter. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There is. Whew.
And rosemary is great with beans as well, as like a white bean.
Yeah. Right now, you have me craving. I may go home and harvest some potatoes and, make a nice rosemary potato dish for dinner tonight.
That sounds great.
What are potatoes? I know what potatoes are good for, but what are potatoes good for? Are they in here?
No, potatoes are not in here.
Not yet.
Rosemary. We were talking about rosemary.
Yeah. That's
potatoes have. I'm sure there's. I'm not sure if there's. Let me look that up in my little handy book that I have here. Maybe they're potatoes. Not. It doesn't come to mind as the most.
It's not the most romantic thing you can eat. That's for sure.
No, but let me see if it comes up here. Sorry, just happened.
So no, that's okay. So, you and Chris both stressed mindfulness and being in the moment when you're doing this, actively thinking about it.
Yes.
And, I read that in the book, but it was so much better to hear you guys talk about it.
To understand it. Here, I just saw. Potato carried in your pocket can cure toothaches and guards against rheumatic warts and gout. Intense against contracting a cold, potatoes should be carried in the pocket or purse all winter. I don't know too much about potatoes, but.
Oh, I love to grow potatoes.
Yeah.
People who've never grown potatoes have never tasted one because,
Yeah, right.
you know, they are a storage crop. And by the time, even if you get them relatively fresh at a farmer's market, they've lost a lot of their sugar. It's converted to starch.
Yeah.
Whereby one of my favorite things in the fall, right around this time of year, is to pull up a potato plant, have a bucket of clean water, pick out the one I like the best, rinse it, and then bite into it raw. It's like sweet corn.
Wow.
Well,
it's amazing, you know, what the difference between what things can taste like, you know?
Yeah. And, you know,
Peruvian potatoes are amazing.
Yeah. There's a relatively new variety out there. I think it's called red gold, rose gold. And it's a red potato with Yukon gold flesh inside.
Wow.
And it's gorgeous, which you don't say about a lot of potatoes. All right, listen, I'm going to get yelled at for taking so much time with you two, but I don't care. It's a great book. It's The Green Witch's Guide to Magical Plants and Flowers by Chris Young and Susan Ottaviano,
Ottaviano. But you've done very good. You've done a very good job. I'm just going to correct you.
I try. Thank God I don't use Latin names for plants on this show. All right. Well, Susan.
Thank you so much.
Good luck at your event in Millville on the 30th at 3 p.m.
Milford.
And I'm happy to hear that you're already working on another book with Chris.
We're excited. Thank you so much for having us.
Oh, thank you so much. I love the book. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, kids, you know what time it is. No, it's not Howdy Doody time. It's time for the question of the week, which we are calling the Great Garlic Debate. To plant or when to plant? That is the real question. When I first started growing garlic some 3 decades ago, I followed the long-established rule to plant my cloves on what is now called Indigenous Peoples Day, early in October. A few years after that, the late Frank Pollock, who had a large garlic farm up in the Poconos, told me that he and his loosely affiliated Pocono Garlic Group had begun planting in September instead. It's only common sense, he assured me. Frosts and freezes start a lot earlier in the fall up here than they do in your garden, and we get much bigger bulbs by giving the plants that extra month to grow a bigger root system. Which got me thinking. Regions south of me could probably wait for that supposedly lucky day, but anybody north of me should plant early, which reminded me of a speaking gig early in my career. I was talking about garlic and repeated the old line that you should plant on what was then called Columbus Day. An older Italian gentleman sitting up front muttered something under his breath. I don't know exactly what he said, but his wife quickly made the sign of the cross. I asked, did I say something wrong? Having only been in the country for about 70 years, he spoke no English. But his daughter was sitting right next to him, so he whispered in her ear. My father says to plant your garlic on the first day kids go back to school and harvest on the last day of school. I thought that the first day of school was great advice, but that the second half was way too early for my little microclimate, where the bulbs are typically the perfect size right around the 4th of July. I announced that I loved the first day of school part and would now make it my recommendation. I would have addressed the issue of his harvest time, but his wife already had her rosary beads out and was quietly whispering Hail Marys. I'm pretty sure that I was giving that talk in the greater D.C. area, where the garlic would be ready to harvest earlier than in my Pennsylvania garden. So maybe even that advice was sound for a warmer growing zone. I had a bed available, so my first run went in the ground on September 16th of this year. I know the exact date because my intern, Sean, took pictures of me with the bed for the show's Facebook page, and they were posted later that day. And that is when the cloves hit the fan. Deborah posted that she wasn't going to plant until October and mentioned that she was in USDA Zone 5B in northern Michigan. That's significantly colder than me, so I felt that she should have had her garlic in the ground already to ensure good root growth before her first hard freeze. Carol, as with many others, was adamant. Not until October, she posted. KZ was just as adamant, but was going to wait until between Halloween and Thanksgiving. Unfortunately, neither revealed their location. Carla posted that she is, quote, west of Philadelphia, which is not a lot of help, as that could mean anywhere between the Philly suburbs and Pittsburgh, and always waits until November. Jeff posted, isn't it too early? I'm just outside Grand Rapids, and I usually plant close to Halloween. Deb in northern Illinois posted that she always waits until mid to late October. There were a lot more such comments, but you get the idea. I found it interesting that virtually everyone who revealed their location was north of me and espoused planting, in my opinion, way too late. It's real simple. The further north you live, the more you should be planting, quote, early. That elderly Italian gentleman had it right. Plant when the kids go back to school. There is no disadvantage to planting your cloves in September, but you could get a miserable harvest if you garden in a low USDA zone and you wait until your carved Halloween pumpkins start to look like the dog's breakfast. I offer as evidence this final Facebook exchange. Jeff of New Miller Farms, an hour south of Grand Rapids, posted that they planted in September last year and had their best harvest ever. In return, a different Jeff posted that he harvested the smallest bulbs he had ever grown from last season's planting and is now a fan of September. Yeah, I realize that this show is going to air at the end of September, so let's keep it simple. If you're north of a line extending west from Philadelphia, don't delay. And think about being ready to plant when you see your first school bus next year. Oh, an unnamed worker at, quote, Friends Farm in central PA posted, waiting until late October. The allium leaf miner is still a threat this time of year. Well, not according to the Penn State Extension Service, which coincidentally is located in the exact same part of Pennsylvania. They explain that the female lays her eggs on garlic leaves in the spring, so there's no reason to delay planting now. And finally, a quick mention that the opposite is true for spring bulbs. They have a very unique growing habit, and in most regions, they should be planted between Halloween and Thanksgiving. Plant spring bulbs too early, and they might not flower in the spring. Well, that sure was an interesting look at something you thought you knew, but probably didn't, now wasn't it? Luckily for yous, the question of the week appears in print at the Gardens Alive website. To read it over at your leisure or your leisure, just click the link for the question of the week at our website, which is still and will forever be YBYGgarden.org. Gardens Alive supports the You Bet Your Garden question of the week, and you will always find the latest question of the week at the Gardens Alive website. Yikes, my producer is threatening to confiscate my cloves if I don't get out of this studio. We must be out of time. But you can call us anytime at 888-492-9444. Or send us your email, you're tired, you're poor, you're wretched refuse, teeming towards our garden shore at YBYG YG at WLVT.org. Please include your location. You'll find all of our contact information, plus answers to your garden questions, audio of this show, video of previous shows, informative details about my upcoming live events, and links to our internationally renowned podcast. It's all at youbetyourgarden.org. You Bet Your Garden is an hour-long public radio show and podcast produced and delivered to you every week from the Univest studios at Lehigh Valley Public Media in Bethlehem, PA. Our radio show is distributed by PRX, the Public Radio Exchange. You Bet Your Garden was created by Mike McGrath. Mike McGrath was created by the legendary William Castle on a dark and stormy night. Ken Queter plays our theme song. Our Chief Content Officer is Yoni Greenbaum. Our Angel of the Airways is Christine Dempsey. Our engineer is Cheerful Charlie Sarah. Our social media director is Amanda Norfleet. Check out her fine work and ponder lots of pretty pictures at the You Bet Your Garden Facebook page. Our peerless princess of profound production is Teresa Radke. Our audio editor is the always lovely Jonas Bowen. Our harassed and harried director of direction is Javier Diaz. Zach the Tack Wisniewski is in the house, or he's in the studio, or he's somewhere around here, as is our always magnificent mallard, Ducky the Dancing Duck. Our beloved and beleaguered CEO is Tim Fallon. I'm your host, Mike McGrath, and if the folks on the second floor keep playing golf instead of listening to the show, I'll see you again next week.